Today we're going to put all of this into this because bigger is better. Hello my friends, and welcome to Tom's Tinkering and Adventures. Today we're going to put a big bore kit into this Honda 400EX quad. I think they also go by the TRX 400, but it's really a XR 400 engine designed for a quad. It's the exact same, well, not exact same, but it's the same basic engine as in the Honda XR 400 motorcycle. It's a very good 4-stroke, single-cylinder, air-cooled engine. And the owner wants to go up to a 416, I believe, is the kit that he bought. They make 440s for these, which I've heard are very good. But I'm just doing what I am asked to do on this thing, and it looks very nice, very clean. I don't believe that he said he's having any issues with it. Just wanted to see if he could punch out a little bit more power. I don't know how much difference there's going to be between the stock engine and this one, but the prices are pretty good for these kits. You can buy an entire kit with a brand new cylinder, piston, rings, gasket set, and even with a cam for about $400-ish, right around there, 400. For that price, you know, it's a nice little upgrade, and if you're having engine issues, it's the way to go. All right, enough talking. We are going to take off the back plastics here. We're going to take off the tank, and the exhaust is going to come off, and the carburetor is going to come off. Probably not going to have to make a whole lot of video about that. It's all pretty straightforward stuff, and we'll see you back once I got down to that point. All right, I set a timer, and I wanted to see how long it took me to get it to this point, and it took me about 15 minutes. And I've never taken one of these Honda 400s apart before. So if you've done it before, you should be able to get to this point, like I said, in less than half an hour. Well, if I would have had a beer break, it would have taken me a little bit longer. I also took off these cam caps here so I can check to see that we're at top dead center. I'm going to set that before I take it apart, mainly because it's going to just make everything easier upon reassembly. We'll get to that in a moment. Your best way to check it is to crank it over and then watch your valves. As you turn it, your exhaust valves here should open first, then your intake valves, that will be the piston going down and then coming back up to compression. Both the valves, intake and exhaust, will be closed, and you're going to look inside that window right there for a little mark. Let me see if I can get it. It's kind of hard for me to hold the camera and the light and turn it at the same time, but there is the mark. It's a little notch on the flywheel. I don't know how well you can see that. Now, Honda has graciously provided this top engine mount that you can take out, and everything should come right out the top here, so I don't have to take the engine out. So I've already got that loose. I'm going to take that out, disconnect the spark plug wire, disconnect this vent hose here, and then start removing the cam cover bolts as I go around here. So it's going to be all these little 8mm bolts, and I think that 10mm as well. You can make a template if you want. It's probably not a bad idea because some of these are different lengths. So I'll get that off and I'll show you what she looks like underneath there. Before I remove this, I'm going to show you a little something here. If for some reason you get these bolts all mixed up, of course you can always read in the manual, but the easiest way is to put this on here. Oh, I'm talking about where they go. Put this back on here and then start putting the bolts down. They all should be sticking up about the same height. So obviously that bolt, if you put that one in there, it's in the wrong place. Same with that, see? Put that one, well, these two are the same. Problem solved. All right, here we go. I'm just leaving the bolts in it for now. And there's no gasket on this. Or is there a gasket? Oh, I guess there is. I just lied to y'all right on camera. Most of these do not have gaskets, just sealant, but this one has a gasket. There you go, there's our camshaft, and our valve springs. So I'll show you how to get the cam off next. Cam chain tensioner is here, we're gonna remove that. That's a couple of 8mm. Kind of a tight fit in here. Usually what you want to do is kind of walk this thing out a little bit. Don't take one screw all the way out. Take one, then the other. Little by little, because it's putting tension down on that cam chain. Why do I not have my camera stand here? I got excited working on this, I guess. I always like it when people like to put performance parts in their engines. For some reason, you know, getting a year older every year and all that, I prefer things to be stock. But I still like performance items. So, a little bit. There you go. And that's how that comes out of there. Usually before I take these out, I like to loosen this center bolt up, because that's where you can reset this thing. But I hate these with this screwdriver tip. They're really hard. There's no room to get in there, so I'm just gonna have to do that in the vise. I'll set that there. Now, on the cam, there's two Allen head screws, bolts in there. So what you have to do is you have to rotate the engine till the bottom one. Well, you take one out and then rotate it till the other one is out. What did I do with my tool? Excuse me. There we go. Got this really nice long Allen wrench. I've already removed the bottom one and loosened the top one. Try your best not to drop that down into the engine, which is easier said than done when you're doing this while holding a camera. And now, this cam sprocket should kind of slide off of here a little bit. There we go. And then you can do the old wiggle dance to get this cam out of here, one-handed while you're holding the camera. We'll get that out and we'll come on back. I don't know how well you're gonna be able to see this, but one last check to make sure that we're at top dead center is, see that little notch on this cam gear? There's one there, and there's one right there. So those should line up with the cylinder head. So that's how you get this whole thing back in time when you put it back together. So I'm gonna remove that gear out of there. I'm gonna hook up a piece of wire so that this chain doesn't just drop all the way in here. It won't drop right now because the cam gear is preventing it. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 cylinder head. Are these nuts or bolts? I've already loosened them. I think they're just nuts, so there's studs coming out of the top of the cylinder, which means I'm gonna have to transfer them over to the new one, but that's okay. So I've got those loose. I'm gonna remove those. There's a washer underneath them. You wanna be careful when you lift that up so you don't drop those washers down into the, especially this one, don't drop it down into the bottom of the engine. When we get them off, we'll pull this cylinder head off and we'll take a look at the top of the piston. Awesome. Here's our cam chain. Got my wire hooked onto it. Cylinder head. Piston. Put this over here. All right, so now to remove the cylinder, we have probably a couple of bolts. Let's take a look. Sometimes there's right there, 1, 2. That's all that's holding it down. These studs, like I said, I thought they might be attached to this cylinder, but they're not. They go through it. So we'll take those 2 out and we'll slide that off. Okay, I gotta come clean with you on this. It wasn't just those 2 bolts. There's 4 bolts that were hiding underneath the valve, the cylinder head gasket. I was gonna say valve cover gasket, cylinder head gasket. So you gotta remove those 4 bolts. I can let this cam chain kind of go down a little bit here. This thing hopefully will come loose. Sometimes they need a little bit of persuasion. Hopefully not much more persuasion than that, though. Alright. There's one of Tom's rules of working in the garage. If you're beating on things with a hammer for more than a few hits, you should probably take another look at it. So we'll take another peek and see if I missed anything. Okay, did not miss anything. It's just on there pretty tight. I wiggled and wiggled and wiggled and wiggled, and she came loose. There you go. Pull her out, and there you go. Cylinder looks pretty good, and the piston looks pretty good on initial inspection. Of course, now I see we do have studs here. These are all going to have to come out and get reinstalled into the new cylinder. I have to clean up this base gasket down here and remove that piston. But after doing all that, we'll be ready to install. I'm just about to dinner break here, but let me get this piston off of here. So there's these little clips that go in here. Everyone's got their favorite way to do it. You can maybe pry it out with a little pick or something, but whatever you do, make sure that you have plenty of rags around here, because that's another thing that likes to fall into the inside of the engine. I have this little needle nose and this little needle nose, and between the 2 of them, I'm usually pretty adept at getting them out. There you go. Oops. Just like that. And now the piston pin should push through. I just push that through with my finger on the other side. And the piston is off. Okay, before I break for dinner, I'll show you how to do the studs. Okay, so this is the old cylinder. And remember I said I had to move these studs over to the new one. I've already got 3 of them out. I'll show you how we do this. This is where having a bucket full of hardware comes in handy. I've got two of these nice nuts. I'll screw one on down here. If you're working on engines, many of you may already know this trick, but if you don't, there you go. And we've already done some bloodletting for the project, so you know it's going to be just fine. Now you tighten these 2 against each other, which is effectively locking that onto this stud. And then I'm going to get a rag because these things are notoriously sharp. These cylinders, it's a good way to get cut up. It's probably how I already have. Then turning the bottom one, it'll break loose and you'll give yourself a little bit more skin loss. At this point, it should be loose enough that you can take it out with a socket. If I would have been real smart, I would have had that hooked up to my little impact driver. There you go. Install and then remove the nuts. So this is a JE piston. It's an aftermarket piston, not the Honda one, obviously, because we're going to a big bore kit. So usually when you buy an aftermarket piston, it'll come with instructions here, so you want to read those. And you also want to read on your manual. Sometimes the manual stuff and the aftermarket piston stuff doesn't agree, so this is kind of where it gets a little bit confusing sometimes. And another thing I see on this piston I don't like is it usually has an arrow, or it says something like this one here says in. That's for the intake side. This one doesn't have anything on it, so that means I kind of have to figure out which side is the intake side and which side is the exhaust side, which kind of stinks, but it's just part of the whole deal. But anyway, make sure you read your manual, and if you have aftermarket parts, read whatever comes with that. This tells you about in gap and which piston ring is which, because each of these is different, and how to locate where the piston rings go. So I'm going to get this all put together, and then we're going to install the piston over here. I've already cleaned this area up and put down a new base gasket. Once again, make sure we have plenty of rags and stuff in here so we don't drop anything in there. New piston is installed. I have installed the clips. Went very well. Now we are going to try to install the cylinder. Sometimes this can be a real pain. Sometimes it goes very well. I have put a little bit of clean oil on the piston and inside of the cylinder. Make sure we run this chain through here initially, and we'll just tie that off a little bit here so it's out of the way. And now the fun part is you have to try to line up this piston underneath here, install it, and squeeze the piston rings. I know you can't really see it from up there. Actually, I'll just set this here and I'll bring you down there so you can see what I'm talking about. Right there, so the cylinder's sitting on top of the piston, and you kind of have to squeeze these piston rings with your fingers while you put a little bit of pressure down. They make a piston ring compressor you can put around there. Sometimes those work, sometimes they don't. I have just as much luck using my fingers. But I'm going to need both hands. So I'm going to knock that out, and then once I have the piston rings in there, we'll come on back. Yeah, that thing fought me a little bit, but we got it installed. Installed this forward cam chain guide as well. Put these two bolts on. Interestingly enough, the manual just says to tighten those. It doesn't say install the 6mm cylinder bolts and tighten them securely. Now for these other 4 bolts that hold the cylinder down, you're supposed to put oil on the threads, tighten them in a crisscross pattern to 33 foot-pounds. So that's what we'll be doing next. Now that we got those torqued down, install the new cylinder head gasket. We're going to go over here. We're going to read this here. So when we install the cylinder head, oiling these nuts, oil your nuts. There you go. Torque these again, 33 foot-pounds. So I'm going to install that cylinder head, and we will torque those bad boys down. Once again, we've got this cam chain hooked onto this wire. Run the wire through there to hold the cam chain up. Once you kind of have it through there, you can tighten down on there. Tie it down on something, I mean to say. There you go. What are we fighting against? go. Oil your nuts. Be careful not to drop the washer down into this area. So like I said, if you're accident prone, and I am, make sure you put lots of rags in there. Always go back and double check all of them after you got the click. Torque wrench click. Okay, cylinder head is torqued on. We're installing more aftermarket parts here. This is an aftermarket cam. Now one thing I noticed difference here is this one doesn't have this automatic decompression, but supposedly it will work just fine. We'll see. I guess if it doesn't, it's not too hard to reinstall. So we're going to move these bearings over to this one and then go back over here, check for our mark in there, line everything up. I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, real quick here, I'm going to show you. There's a plunger and a spring that everyone says you should remove when you put in an aftermarket cam that doesn't have this decompression, because it operates on this little item here. So it says to remove those, and that is right there. So I've removed it, and I'll do a little bit more research, but that's what everyone says. I like to apply a lot of engine assembly lube when I install a new cam, so I'm going to put it all over all these lobes and everywhere else. I've already put on the bearings. So when we get that installed, we'll get everything lined up, and I'll show you what you're looking for. We'll try again to see if you can see that T in there. Hopefully you can. That means we're at top dead center. Pretty washed out with that light. We'll shut that off. All the cam lobes are down. Come over to this side. We have got an alignment mark right there, an alignment mark back behind that. Right there. There's one on the top that basically shows that it's straight up and down. I have installed this top mount screw in there, but those are supposed to get Loctite. So put in like a blue Loctite, not permanent, you don't want to use red, and torque those as required. Let's see, we'll read that up here real quick so that we have it on the video. 14 foot-pounds, torque those to 14 foot-pounds. So now that I'm all lined up, I'm just going to back that one out, put the blue Loctite on it, torque that one. I'll spin it, I'll torque the other one, and then we are going to install the cam chain tensioner. Cam chain tensioner. Okay, so this thing kind of has this automatic spring release on it. So this puts a certain amount of tension on automatically. So when you install it, you have to back it off. You do that by putting a screwdriver in here, turning it clockwise, it brings it in. Now this can be problematic. You have to try to get this thing installed and at least get one of these bolts in all the way, so you kind of don't have enough hands and there's not enough room. In the Honda manual, they actually show how to make a little holding tool. I've made those before, but depending on the vehicle, sometimes you can get in here okay. This one, I'm going to try it without making that little tool. I've made a couple of them. I don't know where they keep disappearing to, but we'll see if we can't get that installed. But the trick is that you want to hold that released. If you install that with it all the way extended, you're going to put full pressure on that cam chain, and you're going to wear out your cam chain and your cam chain guides. It's a common thing I've seen happen when people try to do work on these engines. Boom, installed. Now what you want to do at this point is you're going to want to turn your engine over with the socket over here. A couple of revolutions, make sure everything is still lining up. Check your top dead center on that side, check to make sure everything lines up here. So I'm going to do that, and then I am going to, let's see, we're going to put some of this engine assembly lube on the rockers over here. We're going to install the valve cover and we will adjust the valves. I already have a video of that XR400. I'll try to remember to link it here. If not, you're more than welcome to dig through my videos and watch them all. That'd be pretty cool. What's that green stuff? That's fuel from this carburetor. So this is the upgraded carburetor that we need to install on that Honda 400. This is off of a TRX 450. It's the FCR 39 carburetor. Really common upgrade, but fuel is not supposed to be green. And luckily you don't have smell-o-vision. So I'm just kind of doing a once-over on this thing before we clean it so you can see what the difference is. There's what we look like after we've done a little bit of work on this thing. Yeah, that ought to work. Did a lot of soaking and vibrating, ultrasonic vibrations in my ultrasonic cleaner. These things here from Harbor Freight. This one is the second one I've gotten. I already had one of them fail. This one is kind of starting to fail as well, but by the extended warranty. We're gonna put this together and then we'll get this carburetor in that quad and then we'll cross our fingers everything works. I've already rejetted it to the proper jetting for this vehicle. Here's the FCR 39. FCR, flat CR. Carburetor installed on the 400EX. This plastic cover here, it's kind of close to this, but I think it'll be able to go on there. We'll see what else has to happen. I had to heat up the boot off the intake manifold here. I had to heat that up with the heat gun to get this to install, and now I am running into issues with where this is going to end up. The idle adjust, who knows, but it looks like it's not going to be in a convenient place. Be close to this exhaust. I don't see any way to route it over here. Another issue I see with this carburetor is the choke is buried. So if you need to use the choke, maybe you can reach it underneath. We'll see if that's going to be possible or not. And maybe this fuel line might foul it as well. Probably what I'll have to do is just get rid of this. It's got these nice elbows. So I'm probably going to have to reroute this whole thing. We'll see which way I can make it work where it won't hit that. The next thing I think is going to be an issue is going to be this air box. To me, it looks like this mounts right there. So we kind of have a little gap issue here. We'll see what we can come up with. Here's our next issue, installing this carburetor. Tank I have sitting on here, and as you can see, we've got almost an inch of space. It's hitting on this portion here. So I'm gonna have to bust out something and cut this off, this casting. I don't know about that little piece on this idle adjust. I might have to zip that off too. So I'm gonna tape it straight across and maybe cut it with my cutting wheel. I don't know, this is cast aluminum. It should cut pretty easy. Maybe I'll just use my hacksaw. That's quite a bit closer. Sitting right on top of that thing there. I have to round off these edges. Like I said, maybe knock that piece off of there. The only issue we have is once it's sitting in here like this, is now this fuel valve is right against, directly against the edge of the carburetor. So part of the fun of installing stuff that doesn't belong is problem solving. See, even here it's not that great. We still got some room. All right, I just got these bolts kind of one thread in for the front, and I put the little tank hold down on here. We're still off just a little bit, but I cut off this throttle position sensor cable because we don't need it. Over here you can see we are maybe about 1/4 of an inch off from there. We're sitting right on top of this thing here. I've rounded all that over. Let me pull these off and I'll show you. Okay, rounded that over, cleaned up the whole top here. I also took my heat gun and I heated this up. You can see it's kind of a little bit mushy there. Heated it up and tried to flatten it out a little bit. Harder than I thought it would be. And then the fuel line. Let me see if I can get this off and show you what we did there. Okay. So the front of the carburetor here, this was a squared off edge right here. So I rounded that off a little bit, and then I rerouted this vent hose right there. That used to go up and over here, so I routed it up and over that way. So I think that's gonna work. It's gonna be tight with this fuel line, but we'll try it. So now I have to figure out the air boot, and I think I am going to run to the local hardware store and get some plumbing fixtures and see if we can't make it work with that. After a visit to our hardware store, I got, if you'll focus, that would be cool. Why am I not focusing? I don't know. I got this piece here and a piece of 2-inch PVC. I've already cut a little chunk off of it. So the idea is this is going to go on there, and then this should provide our distance between the two. Now, it all remains to be seen whether this works or not. So let me get it installed and we'll see how it looks. It should be pretty close. This thing is 2 inches and we had 2 inches between the two. Airbox is bolted down. There's a little clip deal that attaches this piece to it. Don't forget to attach this little breather hose piece. What else? I installed this front plastic because that's where the key is at. And after all that was done, then I had to take it all back off because some dumb ass forgot to route the idle adjust somewhere where we could get access to it. Put some fuel in the tank. Let's see what we got. Oh, I like it. I like it when it starts first time. And that's with no choke. But now I have a visitor. All right, she's all back together. I got a Just to let you all know, on the carburetor I got a 180 main and a 50 pilot jet in that FCR, and 2 1/4 to 2.5 turns out on the air screw. And you know, I didn't even check the needle. I don't even know what needle setting I have, but I took it up and down the driveway a little bit and she's running pretty dang good. So I think we're gonna call that a win on this thing. Okay, so there you go, all done. Get her out of my garage. Getting late. All right, if you're digging what I'm putting out, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and if you're not already a subscriber, please consider doing so. I would appreciate it immensely. Thank you very much for watching. Get out there and find your adventure. Adios.